Holy Grail. The Holy Grail, Sehai, is the Christian holy relic that received the blood of Christ, considered to be a noble phantasm. There have been many claims of its existence, 726 of which were investigated by the Holy Church, and many conflicts for such artifacts have happened around the world throughout history. The name is utilized in the various Holy Grail wars as the name of an artifact purportedly capable of granting any wish to whomever comes to claim it, rather than the real artifact, though the Church often gets involved simply because of that reason. Its advent is the ultimate goal of the various Holy Grail wars. Each Holy Grail is in effect a solidified mass of pure magical energy, which reacts to the wishes of the one who holds it in order to grant them. However, on their own they are not capable of generating true miracles without outside intervention. Left alone, they enter a purely reactive state, although they can spontaneously summon servants as a defense mechanism should they be placed in abnormal situations like those encountered in the Grand Orders. Characteristics. In larger Holy Grail wars, there are greater Holy Grails, Daisihai, acting at the core of the ritual, and lesser Holy Grails acting as the catalyst to start the Greater Grail through collecting the defeated servants. The term art graph is used in relation to Holy Grails, the Seventh Heaven art graph of the Moon Cell, the art graph Holy Grails, and the Lesser Holy Grail of Tokyo. Fuyuki. Greater Holy Grail of Fuyuki. The Greater Holy Grail of Fuyuki is the Greater Holy Grail of the Fuyuki Holy Grail War. Designed to reach the root, it is a system that has been designated as a Holy Grail for the purpose of serving as the foundation of the Holy Grail War system. World of Fate/Stay Night. In the Fate and Unlimited Blade Works Roots of Fate/Stay Night, 10 years after the Fifth Holy Grail War, the Mages Association planned on bring back the Greater Grail with great opposition from the Church. After the end of a great turmoil with the same magnitude as the Grail War, the Holy Grail in Fuyuki City was dismantled under the direction of Lord Elmeloi II and Rin Tosaka, and the Grail Wars of Fuyuki came to a complete conclusion. In the Heavens Feel scenario, the Greater Grail is either finally destroyed by Shiro Amiya, normal end, or shut down for good by Iliasville von Einsburn, true end. In the case of Heaven's Feel, a dismantling would still take place, but it would be more akin to a removal, so it can never operate again. A device that can change the world isn't just gone after breaking apart, a cleaning up that is just as much work as the creation process is still needed. World of Fate/Apocrypha. In the World of Fate/Apocrypha, the Third Holy Grail War failed due to the destruction of the Lesser Grail. Furthermore, the Greater Grail was stolen from Fuyuki by Darnik Priestonigd Millennia with support from Nazi forces, who intended to use the Grail as a weapon to win World War II. The three families tried to stop the theft, but they were hampered by exhaustion brought about by the war's fighting. However, Darnik betrayed the Nazis and disappeared with the Grail to Romania, where he spent the next 60 years preparing a holy land suitable for a Holy Grail war. Ultimately, he was successful in establishing himself as the leader of the Igd Millennia clan and starting a war. Characteristics. The Greater Grail is the gateway linked to the root and the ultimate prize for the Fuyuki Holy Grail War, and is in essence, a wishing machine. Known as the Core World, the Grail of Heaven, Ten no High, the core of the Grail was formed by Justice Lisrich von Einsburn, who continues to remain at its center. The creation of the Great Grail was done so under the supervision of Kistra Zelrich Schweinorg, the teacher of the three founders of the war, Justika, Mikiri Zoken, and Nagato Tosaka. The magic circle of the Greater Grail is inscribed upon the land managed by the Tosaka family in Fuyuki City. Located in the Great Cave underneath the Ryudo Temple on Mount Enzu, it consists of a series of seals carved around above 50 meters of bare rock. It is the most ideal location for the Holy Grail to be summoned, though 3 other locations also exist should the location at Mount Enzu be unavailable: the Tosaka Residence, Fuyuki Church, and Fuyuki Central Park. The Greater Grail itself is a system, and the Holy Grail is the key to start it up. The Greater Grail does not have a will, and Justitia's soul was completely sublimated when she sacrificed herself for the ritual. While the Holy Grail collects the souls of the servants, the Greater Grail uses the energy to open a gateway. Though the Lesser Grail is forcibly destroyed by Saber under the command of her master, Kiritsugu Amiya, its corrupted contents spill from the Greater Grail in the form of black mud. For the Holy Grail Wars, the Greater Grail is what selects the masters and invites heroic spirits, setting them in the servant class system. After picking a master from each of the 3 founding families, the Einsburn, Matu, and Tosaka, it preferably picks masters who earnestly want it, although it is possible to have irregulars, like Kirai Kotomine in the Fourth Holy Grail War, who has no sense of purpose except seeking destruction and evil acts. Wish granting. It is, however, only a clump of magical energy and thus is not as omnipotent as people believe it to be, so wishing for something like saving the world without specifying a working method will not suffice. Even if someone lacks power or wealth, the Grail can possibly carry out such a wish if they knew the method of saving the world. Kiritsugu Amiya, knowing only the practice of sacrificing few for the benefit of many, was shown such a vision of what would happen if the world was saved, though the corruption caused him to be shown the most malicious imagery of his saved world. Had he followed through with it, the Grail would have certainly done as it showed him. Ultimately, it can only amplify the scale of realization of wishes within working methodologies and is incapable of granting true miracles. Pathway to the root. Servants that get killed return to being a piece of energy and disappear from the time axis, but the Grail container created by the Einsburns is here to temporarily stop that and store them. When the Holy Grail goes into hibernation, it puts its accumulated mana into storage. When 7 servants are present, their spiritual cores will be released and the heroic spirits' bodies will disappear from this world. The cores alone will then return to the throne of heroes. Once the vessel is filled with energy, the Great Grail can start the ritual that will open a hole to the Akasha. To open a way to the swirl of the Akasha, the Grail needs to sacrifice all 7 servants to start up the Great Grail, but 6 servants are enough if the wish is within the limits of the world. Corrupted Holy Grail. The essence of its content is a colorless force, but after the Third Grail War, it has been polluted by Ingra Mainyu and became a malignant, swirling power, a curse, the third element. Hence, it is absolutely impossible to correct inconsistencies by precise calculations or interactions, and it will interpret any wish of the owner with nothing else than destruction, and grant it. Moreover, once it has been opened, it will keep flowing out infinitely and bring disaster. The servant who is known as Ingra Mainyu was summoned in the Third Grail War. He is a heroic spirit born into existence according to people's wishes. As a result, Avenger was born into this world in order to grant everybody's desire for an existence like all the world's evil, Ingra Mainyu. Even though the Holy Grail would happen every 60 years, the 10-year gap between the 4th and 5th Holy Grail Wars was shorter because the Lesser Grail was destroyed before the Greater Grail could direct the accumulated mana to establish its pathway, with the unused mana becoming trapped in the Grail. The function of the Greater Grail was also already disrupted when it was impregnated with Avenger in the Third War. Additionally, since the corruption, the Grail has been able to summon evil-aligned heroic spirits, something that was not allowed before. Heroic spirits are humans whose legends are passed down in the memory of humanity, regardless of their alignment. The Grail originally was allowed to summon only good, heroic spirits, but ever since the corruption, spirits like Gillister Rice, Medusa and Medea can be summoned despite being anti-heroes rather than heroes in the common understanding of the term. The classes are, however, unaffected. The summoning of Avenger was a mistake done prior to the corruption, and the corruption itself had no known influence on the classes. It seems that it is only a coincidence that the 2 known casters have an evil alignment. This power also gives birth to Inverted Moon of the Heavens, Ten no Jai Kitsuki, and Ingra Mainyu. While it is weak compared to the maelstrom of magical energy that is the Einsburn Grail, what it can do is grant wishes. In a way, it is a small but true Holy Grail. It is the foundation of the looping world in Hollow Ataraxia, where it appears as a black moon, hence the name. Lesser Holy Grail of Fuyuki. The Lesser Holy Grail of Fuyuki is a magical construct designed to enable the descent of the Greater Holy Grail of Fuyuki in the Fuyuki Holy Grail War. The Lesser Grail is kept within the Holy Grail vessel, an inanimate object or living being designed to intake the defeated servants. World of Fate/Stay Night. Up until the Third Grail War, the vessel for the Grail was a literal cup. However, during the events of the Third War, it was damaged in battle and the ceremony was interrupted. For that reason, it had to be made as something that could manage and protect itself. During the Fourth War, Irisviel von Einsburn was a homunculus forged by the Einsburn family to be the physical embodiment of the Lesser Grail. Her deteriorating condition as her consciousness was supplanted by the Grail was mitigated by implanting Avalon into her body until the final days of the war. When she was murdered by Kotomine Kyriai, the Grail took on her persona. During the Fifth War, the Lesser Grail was made as the heart of Iliasviel von Einsburn, a special homunculus made with concentrated alchemy, with Irisviel as her mother and Kiritsugu Amiya as her father. The Grail hidden in Ilia was even more refined than the one in Irisviel, proof that Ilia was expected to be the Einsburn's trump card. At the end of the Fourth War, Zokan Matul acquired the fragments of the destroyed Grail. He synthesized it with his crest worms, which he put inside the body of Sakura Matul. Though she was incomplete, this turned her into a second Lesser Grail. In He Unlimited Blade Works route, Gilgamesh kills Iliasviel and removes her core, which he implants into Shinji. This turns Shinji into an incomplete Lesser Grail. The Holy Grail of the Fuyuki Holy Grail Wars of Fuyuki City appears at the end of the war to grant the final master and servant pair a wish on the Greater Grail, the true device that has the power to grant wishes. Because it is only a vessel to summon the Greater Grail, it is known as the Lesser Grail. What is handed down in the city of Fuyuki is not the one that received the blood of the Christ, but the prototype of an even more ancient, omnipotent container. This container is the 726th Grail that sticks to the legend of the name. It is a gate that leads to the root, Akasha, a hole connected to the nuclear core, the Greater Grail, Daisihai, a wish machine, the key to start up the Great Grail. It is not an omnipotent container, but a replica created to work like a wish machine that can bring forth one's own will. Moon Cell. The term Holy Grail and Moon Cell differs from the standard wishing device that can grant any wish. The Moon Cell Holy Grail is the right to use Moon Cell. Tokyo Holy Grail War. Main article, Greater Holy Grail of Tokyo. In the Tokyo Holy Grail War in Fate/Prototype, the Holy Grail is revealed to be an imitation grail taken from the church by a cardinal. It takes the form of a large cauldron and its purpose is to summon a higher level being like an angel or the beast of revelations. Like with the Fuyuki Holy Grail, the Grail comes in two forms. The Lesser Grail or Symbol and the Greater Grail or Saint Graph. The Saint Graph is said to be able to contain souls and draws power from people's wishes. However, as Saber notes, not all people wish with good intentions, making this Grail corrupt from the start. In the First Holy Grail War, the Greater Grail is located in an underground lake beneath the old Shimbashi Station Railway History Exhibition Hall. Snowfield Holy Grail War. Shortly after the Third Holy Grail War, a group of rogue magi affiliated with the US government stole a piece of Fuyuki's Grail and used it to prepare a rival Holy Land upon the city of Snowfield, Nevada. Despite originally expecting it would take up to 2 centuries to prepare the land for a war, through unknown methods, they were able to start it a few years after the Fifth Holy Grail War. The Magi were aware the original ritual was a marvel of mastery of the arcane arts, and were unable to perfectly copy it in its entirety. They were forced to alter the rite by initiating a false Holy Grail War in order to prime the pump for a true war to take place in Snowfield. The so-called false Holy Grail War came with many blurred lines, including the loss of the Saber template, and allowing for the summoning of irregular servants. After the initial summoning of the 6 remaining servants in the false Holy Grail War, the group of Magi forced the summoning of a Saber-class servant, kickstarting the true Holy Grail War. Collectively, the 2 wars in Snowfield are simply addressed as the Snowfield Holy Grail War. Ainsworth Holy Grail War. The Holy Grail of the Ainsworth Holy Grail Wars of Fuyuki City, instead of being provided by Ainsburn family, which does not seem to exist in Miyu's world, is provided by the Sakatsuki family. It is mentioned by Gilgamesh that the Holy Grail War was rather created for Miyu Sakatsuki, the hidden descendant of the child of God, Kami Chigo, instead of the opposite. With her birth, the Holy Grail was completed. At the end of the 5th war, the young girl was placed in the Ten no Sakazuki Cavern. Here, the winner needs to be in possession of the 7 class cards used by the participants during the Ainsworth Holy Grail War, to be able to have his wish granted by the Holy Grail. After the Holy Grail War. Years before the start of Fate/Requiem, several simultaneous Holy Grail Wars all occurred at once and became public knowledge, triggering World War III. The victors of the various Grail Wars fought each other to claim more Grails, aiming to climb higher and higher. Fuyuki was one of the fiercest battlegrounds, but the final winner was unknown. The ritual in Fuyuki was not completed, and the accumulated magical energy from its Holy Grail dispersed. The victor of the world-spanning Holy Grail War was Chitose Manazuru, who organized the conflict into a tournament structure and came out on top with her servant Lucius Longinus. Chitose asked the Grail to persist and distribute itself, becoming Grails in the hearts of humans, terminal devices of the stigmata. The Holy Grail also restructured the wards of Tokyo into Mosaic City for the survivors of the war to gather in. Humans now have Holy Grails inside their hearts, giving everybody a partner servant designated from birth, immunity to illness and disease, eternal youth, and command spells that regenerate over time via the Grail's magical energy. The magical energy supplied to everybody by the Holy Grail via Mosaic City's ley lines can be used for simple magecraft and is more than enough to sustain a servant in everyday life with no discomfort. The Karen series are human interfaces that allow the Holy Grail to communicate directly with the people of Mosaic City. A hybrid intelligence, the most valuable in the city, born of the fusion of summoning magecraft, modeled on the kind that calls forth heroic spirits, and cutting-edge information engineering technology. When Eris tiredly muttered, "So the war isn't over yet," while in bed, she quickly clapped her hand over her mouth. That was a dangerous way to think, and if she wasn't more careful she would be removed by the Holy Grail. Enkidu. Heroic spirit Enkidu possesses the ability to act as a wish grantaire in the Babylonia singularity. Grand Order. As part of the incineration of humanity, Solomon sent art graph Holy Grails acting as giant mana batteries to 7 significant points in human history to sow chaos and aid in its destruction. These Holy Grails appear to function similarly to the better-known ones, but are also capable of causing extreme changes to history that lead to the production of singularities. Destroying or securing the Grail is necessary to resolve the singularity it creates. Occasionally minor singularities will occur but disappear without causing any significant trouble, generating a Holy Grail from their concentrated magical energy. While these Grails lack the power to be considered true omnipotent wish grantaires, they can still be highly dangerous if they fall into the wrong hands. Leonardo da Vinci is in charge of collecting these Grails, at times giving them to Chaldean servants for fun. Knights of the Round Table. The Knights of the Round Table sought a Holy Grail, acquired by Galahad. Subcategory Holy Grail. Subcategory Holy Grails are those utilized in the framework of the subcategory Holy Grail Wars. Imitations of the Greater Grail, they function in a similar manner, but can only sustain 2 to 5 servants. In the events of Fate/Labyrinth, someone has installed and activated one of the subcategory of the Holy Grails in the 7th Labyrinth of Kabak Alcatraz. It is located deep within the bottommost level of this labyrinth. The subcategory Holy Grail is an imitation of the Greater Grail. Its function as a wish-granting device is inferior to the true Greater Grail. The subcategory Holy Grail operates just like the one in the Holy Grail War. But, the heroic spirits never surpass 5 servants. In this subcategory Holy Grail War, there are only 4 servants. 4 servants were automatically summoned. The servants are Archer, Assassin, Caster and Saber. This time the victory conditions of the subcategory Holy Grail War is to reach the centermost room, on the bottommost level. Find the subcategory Holy Grail, and the person who obtains it becomes the winner. However, the 4 servants are permitted to act independently as they aim for the same location, whether it is to destroy or obtain the subcategory of the Holy Grail. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.